Space Force. A. Classification review. The Secretary of Defense shall, 1. Not later than 120 days after the date of the enactment of this Act, conduct a review of each classified program managed under the authority of the Space Force to determine whether a. the level of classification of the program could be changed to a lower level, or b. the program could be declassified, and 2. not later than 90 days after the date on which the Secretary completes such review, commence the change to the classification level or the declassification as determined in such review. B. Coordination. The Secretary shall carry out the review under subsection A. 1. In coordination with the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy and, as the Secretary determines appropriate, the heads of other elements of the Department of Defense. C. Report. Not later than 60 days after the date on which the Secretary completes the review under subsection A. 1. The Secretary, in coordination with the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy, shall submit to the Congressional Defense Committees a report identifying each program managed under the authority of the Space Force covered by a determination regarding changing the classification level of the program or declassifying the program, including 1. the timeline for implementing such change or declassification, and 2. any risks that exist in implementing such change or declassification. Sec. 1610. Report on range of the future initiative of the Space Force. Not later than 90 days after the date of the enactment of this Act, the Chief of Space Operations shall submit to the Congressional Defense Committees a report containing the following. 1. A detailed plan to carry out the Space Force range of the future initiative, including the estimated funding required to implement the plan. 2. Identification of any specific authorities the Chief determines need to be modified by law to improve the ability of the Space Force to address long-term challenges to the physical infrastructure at the launch ranges of the Space Force, and an explanation for why such modified authorities are needed. 3. Any additional proposals that would support improved infrastructure at the launch ranges of the Space Force, including recommendations for legislative action to carry out such proposals. Sec. 1611. Space Policy Review. A. In general. The Secretary of Defense, in consultation with the Director of National Intelligence, shall carry out a review of the space policy of the Department of Defense. B. Elements. The review under subsection A shall include the following. 1. With respect to the 5-year period following the date of the review, an assessment of the threat to the space operations of the United States and the allies of the United States. 2. An assessment of the national security objectives of the department relating to space. 3. An evaluation of the policy changes and funding necessary to accomplish such objectives during such 5-year period. 4. An assessment of the policy of the Department with respect to deterring, responding to, and countering threats to the space operations of the United States and the allies of the United States. Five, an analysis of such policy with respect to normative behaviors in space, including the commercial use of space. 6. An analysis of the extent to which such policy is coordinated with other ongoing policy reviews, including reviews regarding nuclear, missile defense, and cyber operations. 7. A description of the organization and space doctrine of the Department to carry out the space policy of the Department. 8. An assessment of the space systems and architectures to implement such space policy. 9. Any other matters the Secretary considers appropriate. C. Report 1. Requirement, not later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this Act, the Secretary, in consultation with the Director, shall submit to the appropriate Congressional committees a report on the results of the review under subsection A. 2. Annual updates. Concurrent with the submission to Congress of the budget of the President for each of fiscal years 2024 through 2026 pursuant to Section 1105(a) of Title 31, United States Code, and more frequently during such period as the Secretary determines appropriate, the Secretary, in consultation with the Director, shall submit to the appropriate Congressional committees a report describing any update to the assessments, analyses, and evaluations carried out pursuant to such review. 3. Each report under this subsection shall be submitted in unclassified form, but may include a classified annex. D. Appropriate Congressional committees defined in this section. The term appropriate Congressional committees means the following. 1. The Congressional Defense Committees. 2. The Committee on Science, Space, and Technology and the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence of the House of Representatives. 3. The Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation and the Select Committee on Intelligence of the Senate. Sect. 1612. Annual Briefing on Threats to Space Operations. A. Requirement, not later than February 28 each year through 2026, the Chief of Space Operations, in consultation with the Commander of the United States Space Command and the Director of National Intelligence, shall provide to the appropriate Congressional committees a briefing on the threats to the space operations of the United States posed by Russia, China, and any other country relevant to the conduct of such operations. B. Elements. Each briefing under subsection A shall include the following. 1. A review of the current posture of threats described in such subsection and anticipated advances in such threats over the subsequent 5-year period. 2. A description of potential measures to counter such threats. C. Distribution of briefing. On or about the same day as the Chief of Space Operations provides to the appropriate congressional committees a briefing under subsection A, the Chief shall also provide to the National Space Council, the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of Transportation, and the Administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration the briefing at the highest level of classification possible. D. Appropriate congressional committees defined in this section. The term appropriate congressional committees means 1. The Committees on Armed Services, Energy and Commerce, Transportation and Infrastructure, and Science, Space, and Technology, and the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence of the House of Representatives, and 2. The Committees on Armed Services and Commerce, Science, and Transportation, and the Select Committee on Intelligence of the Senate. Sect. 1613. National Security Council briefing on potential harmful interference to global positioning system. A. Requirement: not later than 30 days after the date of the enactment of this Act, the Secretary of Defense shall provide to the National Security Council, the Secretary of Commerce, and the Commissioners of the Federal Communications Commission a briefing at the highest level of classification on the current assessment of the Department of Defense, as of the date of the briefing, regarding the potential for harmful interference to the global positioning system, mobile satellite services, or other tactical or strategic systems of the Department of Defense, from commercial terrestrial operations and mobile satellite services using the 1525 to 1559 MHz band and the 1626.5 to 1660.5 MHz band. B. Matters included. The briefing under subsection A shall include 1. Potential operational impacts that have been studied within the megahertz bands specified in such subsection, and 2. Impacts that could be mitigated, if any, including how such mitigations could be implemented. C. Congressional briefing, not later than 7 days after the date on which the Secretary provides the briefing under subsection A. The Secretary shall provide to the appropriate congressional committees such briefing. D. Independent technical review. The Secretary shall carry out subsections A and C, regardless of whether the independent technical review conducted pursuant to Section 1663 of the William M. Mac. Thornberry National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021, Public Law 116-283, has been completed. E. Appropriate congressional committees defined. In this section, the term appropriate congressional committees means 1. The Congressional Defense Committees, and 2. The Committee on Energy and Commerce of the House of Representatives and the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation of the Senate. Sect. 1614. Non-geostationary orbit satellite constellations. A. Report not later than 1